the style that I chose to talk about for Module 10 is going to be disco. And we're talking about how this contributed to the rise of a marginalized population. To begin with, I had to look up what is a marginalized population. And I know that we talked about this, but it's been a minute since I read through the PowerPoints and things like that. So I looked it up again, and the definition of a marginalized population is a group of people that is excluded from full participation in society. Marginalization includes the withholding of political rights, economic opportunity, and social integration. And examples of this are racial and ethnic groups, immigrants and refugees, and individuals with mental or physical disabilities. Older people are those of lower economical social status, or people that are put down because they're younger. You don't have a say. And so the one I chose to do was disco because disco emerged in the 1970s, and it was a part of like the United States urban nightlife scene. A lot of the beginning like disco artists were African Americans, and I think that this is so important to address because it goes along with the civil rights movement from the 1970s. So started with African Americans. Some of it was Hispanic and Latino. A lot of Italians enjoyed it too. And it started during the late 1960s and went into the 1970s. And it can be seen as a reaction by the 1960s countercultural to rock music and the stigmatization of dance music at the time. So before, like in the 1960s, a lot of dance came out, like the bump and the hustle, and everybody was shocked because rock music was not white. You know what I mean? I don't know how to explain that in a better way. But suddenly things that weren't white were becoming popular. Music that had been taken from other cultures was on the radio and on the TV, and kids were dancing to it, and people were, using it. And so disco like took off in the 1970s and became less popular in the 80s, except for in Italy. And throughout like European countries, it was super major in the 1980s as well. I think more than anything, it was important because it gave people a chance to share their culture and their music. And people didn't always get that until then. So let's see. In the early years, a big reason why disco was so popular because of the dancing that went along with it. It was like more of a hang loose or freestyle approach, whereas dance before had been more classical. It had been like ballet or, the waltz or dances like that were from Europe, wider cultures with people that shared those type of dance music with us. And so as soon as the disco came along, suddenly people were doing things like the bump and the hustle, shaking their ass, dancing up in clubs, dancing with different people. It desegregated people because you had white people and dance people all doing the disco in the 70s in the same club. And it brought forth this feeling of desegregation and connection between different people. A big thing with disco was the 1970s fashion. This is the first time that we started seeing brighter colors and prints that were like African prints we took from, African clothing, and like the afros became a thing. Even for white people, they started trying to put their hair up in the big afros, and it just took a lot of the biases and things away, and people started doing it because they could, and because we started realizing that other ways of life weren't bad. Different isn't bad. One of the bad things of it was like the drug subculture underneath. It just glamorized like the use of LSD and other drugs like that, and I think that a lot of times like that happens with like rock music and things like that too. I don't think that had anything to do with a certain ethnic group or anything like that, and to say so would be wrong because I don't agree with that at all. But like a lot of times, like in nightclubs and big groups, people do drugs and things like that more. And so if this is the kind of music that is going to be played at a club, then yes, that always goes underneath it. But I do think that the civil rights movement was, I can't say words today. The civil rights movement was pushed further along by music and things like that. If you think about even like it was like 1974 to 1977 is when this music became mainstream, and it was on the radio, it was in front of everybody, and it peaked in around 1974. The Jackson 5, you know what I mean? People like that started, they were like all African American artists, and it just gave them a chance, gave them a footing in the musical world and in the world. You know, we start seeing people like this, and you can't put people down, you know. You're not going to say anything about the top artists on the radio. If you say anything bad about them, people know you're just being a jerk, you know. And it just opened a way for African artists and other artists to get their music out and gave them a chance to be demarginalized, to connect with the real world. So this was super rambly, and I am so sorry about that, but thank you for listening.